Good morning, I'm Angelo Castro III.
I'm Angela, and we are the Castros.
We bring you the news.
And the views that make you think.
Sometimes you agree.
Sometimes we don't.
This is News and Views.
And here are today's headlines.
At least 66 people have died and many remain missing after Typhoon Tino battered the Visayas and Mindanao, according to the Office of Civil Defense.
The ICI has asked the Ombudsman to investigate former DPWH Secretary Manuel Bonoan and several officials over flood control anomalies.
Some lawmakers are calling for a probe into the DepEd's classroom construction program, citing persistent backlogs.
Think Muna Pilipinas and UNESCO have successfully concluded the 2025 Philippine Media and Information Literacy Conference, or MILCON 2025. Typhoon Tino has battered the country, flooding cities, destroying homes, and leaving dozens dead in its wake. Here is the report.
Typhoon Tino has unleashed massive flooding and destruction across several parts of the country. In Metro Cebu, nearly half of the city was submerged in less than 24 hours, including Villa del Rio subdivision, where people had to seek shelter on top of their roofs. When the floodwaters receded, the scene was devastating. Cars were piled on top of each other.
Sobrang takot. Hindi namin alam anong nangyari sa amin, bakit biglang rumagasa yung tubig.
Nag-pray na lang na maka-survive ba. Kaya grabe yung akyat na mo sa pader, then para maka-akyat sa ato.
In Sitio Isla Verde, Barangay San Isidro, the roofs of almost every house were blown off. Talisay City was not spared from the flooding either. Snakes were also seen emerging from the floodwaters. At Crocolandia, a nearby crocodile park, management assured the public that no reptiles had escaped, emphasizing that they have strict safety protocols during calamities. At least 51 people have been confirmed dead in Cebu following the onslaught of Typhoon Tino. The Provincial Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Office reports 39 fatalities across the province, 15 in Compostela, 8 in Danao City, 9 in Mandaue City, and 7 in Talisay City. Meanwhile, Cebu City Mayor Nestor Arquival confirmed 12 additional deaths within the city. Over in Antique, the typhoon blew away roofs and caused widespread power and communication outages. In eastern Samar, homes and other structures were destroyed in the town of Giwan. Due to the extensive damage, the municipality of Giwan has been placed under a state of calamity. Nearly 8,000 families, or about 25,000 individuals, were forced to evacuate as a result of the storm.
Hindi po kami tinamaan actually ng ulan. Ang matindi sa amin was hangin. Blackout na dito sa province namin pagpasok ng bagyo. Tapos humina rin yung cellular signal dito. I'm not sure if that's connected with the electricity line, no?
In Silago, Southern Leyte, where Typhoon Tino first made landfall, videos captured violent winds and torrential rains, toppling trees and damaging homes. The Philippine Army, local government units, barangay officials, and volunteers have since started clearing operations in affected areas. On Dinagat Island, residents of Barangay Carmen Loreto endured intense winds that ripped through homes overnight. At Liberty National High School, which served as an evacuation center, the ceiling collapsed and parts of the roof were blown away. Meanwhile, 14 families, including one infant, took shelter in a drainage canal at the height of the typhoon. They are now reported to be safe and in good condition. Clearing operations and damage assessments are ongoing in Dinagat Island following the onslaught of Typhoon Tino.
Typhoon Tino is about to exit the Philippine area of responsibility after wreaking havoc in Visayas. But another tropical cyclone is approaching PAR, which is also expected to affect the country. Let's get the latest from Pag-asa weather specialist John Manalo. John, thank you for joining us again.
Magandang umaga din po, Ma'am Angelo and Ma'am Angela and Sir Angelo. At sa atin din mga taga-subaybay.
Alright, John, what's the latest update on Typhoon Tino? Meron pa ba siyang tatamaan ng mga areas on the way out?
Siguro mahalaga din po na i-summarize natin na naka-8 landfall po itong si Bagyong Tino. Yung dalawang huli na landfall niya ay kaninang alas 4 Gs ng umaga sa Batas Island, Taytay, Palawan. At yung huling landfall nito ay 4:50 ng umaga sa El Nido, Palawan. Sa kasalukuyan, nandito na siya sa coastal waters, papunta na ng West Philippine Sea. At sa mga susunod na oras din, ay baybayin niya ng West Philippine Sea, and eventually, bukas ng umaga ay nasa labas na ito ng Philippine Area of Responsibility. Bahagyang humina yung intensity nitong si Tino, but eventually pag nasa West Philippine Sea na siya ay mas mag-intensify pa ito, pero mananatili ito sa typhoon category hanggang sa kumilos pa ito pakanluran sa eastern part ng Vietnam.
Perhaps, John, can you explain to our viewers as well kung bakit ba may mga pagkakataon na kapag paalis ang isang bagyo, medyo parang humihina na ito?
Kasi po yung halimbawa po may bagyo tayo, yung source po ng energy para mas mag-intensify pa itong mga bagyo natin ay yung karagatan. Lalo na kapag mataas yung temperatura ng karagatan o yung tinatawag natin na sea surface temperature. Pero kapag nasa kalupaan po, mas mababawasan yung source niya ng energy para mas mag-intensify o mas lumakas pa. Kaya after niyang magbaybayin yung Visayas region, nandun nakita natin yung pagbawas in terms of lakas ng hangin nitong si Tino. At pagbalik niya dito sa West Philippine Sea, dito naman natin nakikita na unti-unti ay mas lalakas na naman ito dahil nasa katubigan na naman siya at mainit po yung umataas yung sea surface temperature natin dyan. Pero mananatili pa rin sa typhoon category.
Until when ang epekto ng Tino dyan sa atin?
Yung nananatiling epekto nitong si Bagyong Tino ay actually may nakataas pa rin tayo na signal number 4. So yung signal number 1 to 4 natin ay nakapaloob na lang, mas limited na lang yung area dito sa northernmost portion ng Palawan, and then signal number 3 sa paligid nito, at sa mga susunod natin na bulletin ay mas mababawasan pa yung mga nakataas natin ito na signal numbers patungkol sa hangin.
Okay. John, hindi pa man ito tuluyang nakakalabas itong si Typhoon Tino. May nakikita tayo dito sa weather system natin na namumuo na naman din na sama ng panahon. Can you tell us more about it? Kung ilang percentage, 'di ba, yung chance niya na makapasok sa Philippine Air Responsibility at saan ang tahak niya?
Opo, yung huli nating bulletin, kapag nasa labas po ng Philippine Area of Responsibility, ay ang nilalabas natin ay advisory. So yung kapag nasa PAR, ang nilalabas natin ay Tropical Cyclone Bulletin. Pero yung frequency niyan ay every 6 hours, pero kapag landfalling ay nagiging every 3 hours yung issuance natin. At yung nasa labas ng PAR, ang binilalabas po natin ay Tropical Cyclone Advisory naman. At yung huli nating nilabas kanina ay na advisory ay kagabi ng alas 11 kagabi ng alas 11. Ang susunod natin na advisory ay ngayong darating na 11 AM. Every 12 hours naman itong advisory natin. Patungkol naman sa babaybayin nitong si papangalanan po natin ito, by the way, na uwan. So yung uwan naman ay Bisaya na term for ulan. At nakikita din natin yung rapid intensification. Sa susunod na 24 oras, dun sa huli nating advisory, tropical depression itong minomonitor natin, pero posibleng sa kasalukuyan, ito ay tropical storm na. At sa mga susunod na oras, nakikita din natin na mataas yung tsansa na ito ay mas lumakas pa into severe tropical storm. At bago ito pumasok ng Philippine Area of Responsibility, ay mas lalakas pa ito into typhoon category. At pagpasok niya ng Philippine Area of Responsibility by Friday night or Saturday ng umaga, ay mas lalakas pa ito into super typhoon.
Anong areas anong areas natamaan ni Juan? I heard kasi may possibility na pwedeng tumahak to sa Northern Luzon.
Opo, may dalawang scenario pa tayo na ina-analyze sa kasalukuyan. At yung isang scenario ay yung landfalling scenario. At kapag nag-landfall po ito dito sa Northern Luzon, malaking bahagi po ng Luzon yung maaapektuhan kasama yung Metro Manila. At kapag nag-landfall po yan, aabot hindi lang sa Cagayan Valley region. Maapektuhan din yung Cordillera Administrative Region, ganun din yung Ilocos region. Yung Central Luzon din ay maapektuhan. Ganun din naman yung trough. Dahil super typhoon ito, nakikita natin na malaking chance na maging super typhoon ito. Posible na yung tinatawag natin na trough or yung extension ng kaulapan nitong magiging bagyong si Juan ay aabot din sa Metro Manila at ganoon din naman sa southern part ng Luzon. Pero yung isa pa nating scenario ay posible na hindi naman ito maglandfall. Hopefully ito yung maging scenario natin. Nakadepende po kasi yan sa iba't ibang atmospheric system. Halimbawa yung high pressure area na nasa may bandang Japan na pwedeng tumulong, depende sa paggalaw niya, na mas bumaba pa or matulungan ito na mas maging favorable na umakyat pa. Ang mangyayari sa second scenario natin, lalapit siya sa northeasternmost part ng Luzon and eventually ay magno-northward siya or magno-northeastward papalapit dito sa southern part ng Japan or sa Okinawa.
So,
Hopefully, kapag gano'n naman yung nangyari, yung Cagayan Province kasama yung extreme northern Luzon, yung Buyan Islands at yung Batanes, yung pinaka maapektuhan.
So, ang pinaka-linawin ko dyan, no, ang pinaka-senaryo natin dalawa lang. It's either pumasok siya or hindi. Pag pumasok siya, wala na ibang tatahakin to kung hindi Northern Luzon.
Yes po.
Oo.
Okay.
Pag nag-landfall po, opo.
Oo. Pero ganun pa man, ito, if ever, wala naman siya magiging effect sa bandang Visayas. Kasi of course, why am I
Malayo.
asking this, Because hindi pa naman natatapos yung mga kababayan natin dun sa Cebu is trying to get up pa lang di ba? Makabawi dun sa nangyari sa kanila kay Tino. So, kaya kita tinatanong regarding that.
Opo, sa analysis po natin ay maliit yung tsansa na mas bumaba pa ito at tumama sa Visayas. Pero hindi po zero yung posibilidad na yon dahil meron po tayong tinatawag na cone of probability o tinatawag natin ngayon na cone of confidence.
Uncertainty.
Opo, yung forecast track natin, meron po yung range, upper limit and lower limit. Kapag nakuha niya yung pinaka-lower limit, ay posible din na yung trough or yung extension ng kaulapan ay maapektuhan lalo na yung northern part ng Visayas. And hopefully ay hindi naman po na ganun yung mangyari after ng lindol and then si Tino and then ito na naman pong bago. So, hopefully ay hindi naman na po.
Ako, ang dasal ko na lang, sana along the way matunaw na lang siya, wag nang umakyat or whatever.
Pero quickly lang dyan, before we let you go, no, last question, ano probability na tatama to sa, that this will make landfall?
Well, hindi pa po natin masasabi talaga yung probability. Pero most ng ating mga models at saka yung analysis natin, mataas din yung chance talaga na mag-landfall. Siguro kung opinion ko na lang po ito, ay malaki po yung chance, mga 60-40-60 na magla-landfall siya, 40 naman na, pero hindi po ito yung main statement na pag-asa sa akin po na analysis ito. At meron po tayong ilalabas mamayang 11 a.m. na advisory patungkol dito. At dito po natin mas mabibigyan linaw yung magiging track pa nitong si parating na uwan.
Klarong-klaro.
Klarong-klaro. Galing kay John. Thank you, Pag-asa Weather Specialist John Manalo, for that report.
Maraming salamat po at ingat po tayo.
Let's now check the situation in Cebu where Typhoon Tino caused massive flooding. We have Cebu City Mayor Nestor Archival. Mayor, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone.
All right, Mayor, I'd like to start off. No, this was yung flooding in Cebu was really one in a million, very rare. But ano po sitwasyon ngayon in Cebu? Is it still flooded?
Mayroong areas na flooded pa, especially sa areas sa coastline and also sa may river banks, no? But wala na critical areas. Tingnan natin actually.
Okay. Mayor, syempre ang tanong po dito, ano po ba yung pinaka naging dahilan? Bakit po nagkaganito? Bakit po talagang terrible po talaga yung dinanas o ating mga kapatid na Cebuano dyan sa pagbaha?
Okay. So, dito sa Cebu, first na talagang yung downpour, talagang malakas. Yan, sabi niyo, 1 in a million. So, basically, yun ang nangyari. Now, dito sa Cebu, hindi masyado strong yung winds, no? But yung downpour ng ulan, talagang malakas. So, yeah, yun ang area. At saka yung areas where nasaan yung areas sa may north din.
Mayor, yung dun po ba sa may subdivision na napanood po namin kahapon na umapaw na unusual, very unusual po sa kanila. Sakop niyo po ba yun? Sakop niyo po ba yung area na yun?
Yes.
Okay. So, ano po ba yung naging problema doon?
Okay, one is that yung subdivision na yun, parang half ng circumference niya, yun ang riverbanks.
Right.
Now, yung mga areas where the river are, meron siyang parang wall, standing wall. And yeah.
Saan po, yung tubig po galing sa Butuanon River, tama po ba?
That's correct, Butuanon River.
Okay, tapos yung retainer wall, yun po yung nawala, yung nasira, tama po ba?
Yes, yun, nag-collapse yun. Nag-collapse yun because
Pwede po bang Right, no? So, pasensya
Yeah.
na po kayo, Mayor. Hindi po namin kayo masyado maintindihan po baka dahil din po sa signal, ano? Kasi we want to know po what really happened here, especially dun nga po dun sa nasira na retainer wall. Ano po ba ang responsibilidad natin doon pagdating sa ganyang mga pangyayari?
Okay, as per information, ang nangyari doon, ang naglagay sa retaining wall, yung contractor, yung developer actually. Pero matagal na yun, 30 plus years na yun. So, ang nangyari, first time yun, compacted sila for the last 30 plus years.
Right.
Yung mga tao nakatira doon, kahit anong lakas ng typhoon, parang super typhoon, hindi naabutan ng tubig. But ito, talagang ordinary, yung right after pag-collapse sa retaining fence, yan, talagang plus the fact na talagang malakas yung tubig, ayan, na pumupunta doon sa subdivision. So they were not expecting, no? They were not expecting it. But however, beside the river din, mayroong of mga settlers na mga 40 houses na beside the river. Parang sa river bank sila.
Yeah.
So what we did, sinabihan natin sila dahil kailangan mag-evacuate na sila, mag-transfer na sila doon sa evacuation centers. But ang nangyari, ayaw nila. So, akala mo sa the time, wala namang problema. Maraming bagyo ng nakadaan, but wala namang problema. And considering na yung bagyo hindi as strong as before, sabi nila, sige, hindi na kami. So, for 14 houses, pamilya, parang pamilya na yun, may 13 persons na missing. 13 persons. Out of the 13, ang na-retrieve natin is 8.
Okay.
So yung 5, hindi pa natin nakita ngayon until now. So that's what we are trying to find.
So yung natitirang 5 po, are we still under search or are we going to retrieval mode na po?
Yes, that would be retrieval na.
Okay.
Kasi ang tingin namin wala na yun. So, yun, ang area na coastline at saka mga sa riverbanks, yun ang tinitingnan sa mga volunteers natin at saka parang retrieval.
Yes. And Mayor, based sa mga reports na pumapasok, I understand yung sa subdivision na yun, ang dami daw kotse na kumpul-kumpulan at nagpatong-patong dahil sa taas at lakas sa taas ng tubig. Na-clear na po ba ito or iiwanan as is? Kasi I understand gusto rin makita daw ng insurance companies ito for filing of possible claims.
Yes, actually, ang nangyari, yung main road, yun ang kinukuha na natin. Nakuha lang tayo ng mga footages, yung mga photos para nila doon sa insurances. But right now, ang focus natin is yung main road na talagang i-clear natin para yung mga yung mga magdadala ng tubig, ambulance, at para magamit na magbigay ng mga donations kung makapasok. At saka yung areas where parang chapel area nila, kiniklear natin. So 90% na, 99% siguro, na-clear na natin until kagabi. But ngayon, babalik na naman kami yung areas where yung nagpatong-patong yung mga sasakyan, yan, makakukunin na natin yun.
So, aside po dito sa subdivision na ito, ilang barangay pa po yung apektado ng baha? At ilang pamilya po, individual yung nasa evacuation center or stranded po as of now?
Mayroon tayong 80 barangays. Now, yung 80 barangays na tamaan, but it's not that severe, no? So, yung mga areas where we have the complex, mayroon tayong evacuation center. So, mag-expect lang tayo na, let us say you have about 200 individuals nang dyan. So, an-estimate natin 80 ka barangay, yun ang medyo na nasa evacuation centers. That is an-estimate because right now, ang medyo mayroon tayong problema sa communications, especially sa mga mobile.
Mayor?
At saka
Mayor.
Percent
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead po. Nawawala po kasi kayo. Go ahead po, sir.
Yung 50% na restore ng mobile is cutting off. We'll be expecting and within the next 2 days, baka ma-restore na ito. Yun ang medyo mahirapan kami, especially sa mga areas sa mountain.
And at this point, Mayor, ano po official, yes, Mayor, ano po official stance ng Cebu City po in terms of declaring a state of calamity?
Official what? Actually, kahapon, I think the council already, the calamity.
Okay. Mayor, mabalik ko lang din po dun sa sa subdivision ano po ba ang standard operating procedure po diyan pagdating po dun sa retainer wall? Ito po ba ay sa management or administration ng subdivision o sa lokal na pamahalaan?
As per information, kasi matagal na itong subdivision na ito, sa developer ito, but it's been about 30 years. Ayun, ang tinitingnan natin, so siguro tungan na lang sa government yun.
Yeah, well, Mayor, kasi the reason why I'm asking this because para po malaman natin na kung kanino po yung obligasyon na para i-check po ito, lalo na alam po natin na 30 years na po pala ito, na ma-check na kung ito ay okay pa.
Actually, hindi okay ito. Wala na.
Ano po?
Ngayon, it's actually, kasi hindi na lang.
Mayor, sorry po pakiulit na lang po, napuputol-putol po kayo dahil po sa signal po siguro. Mayor?
Yes, correct.
Go ahead
regarding sa responsibility, yan, baka kasi 30 years na yun
Right.
Tingnan po natin muna. But we're not actually doing it right now kasi dito kami sa rescue and rehabilitation.
Right. Okay, sige po Mayor, maraming salamat po sa inyong oras. Of course, ang aming panalangin para po sa inyong mga kababayan dyan, mag-iingat po kayo. Maraming salamat po.
Salamat.
Cebu City Mayor Nestor Arquibal. Sayang kasi hindi natin maintindihan masyado. I think kasi that's one of the reasons why hindi din makontak yung ibang mga kababayan doon dahil nga yung signal nagpuputol.
Pero kasi yung I think what the Mayor is trying to say also is accountability comes after rescue. All the rescue and the retrieval and has been done. Usually naman yan ang protocol nila. Ayusin natin lahat. And when everything settled down, then we hold people accountable. So I guess at this point, they have to find out who
kasi may mga nawawala pa.
Who mans that wall, that perimeter wall? Is it the local government or does it belong to the subdivisions? So some subdivisions, part of their structure yun, hindi pwede galawin.
Sabi niya developer daw.
Developer kasi yun So, but later on, we'll find out kasi we're still reeling from the effects of the bagyo. But I think when all is settled, I think we can now take a look. Was there flood control issues? Was there oversight on the part of local governments?
Kasi if you will ask yung mga residente ng Cebu, sinasabi nila na ngayon lang sila naka-experience ng ganitong klaseng pagbaha doon sa area.
There is climate change also.
Yeah, of course. So isa rin yung sa tinitignan nila.
And there's ghost control project also.
All right, we'll be back with more stories after the break. Keep it here on One News. Good morning. You're still watching News and Views here on One News.
Makabayan Bloc is urging the House of Representatives to investigate the Department of Education's classroom construction program, citing persistent backlogs and unmet targets since 2018. Mobile journalist Amy Atienza has the report.
Makabayan Bloc urges the House of Representatives anew as they filed a House resolution to investigate the school building program of the Department of Education during Duterte and Marcos administrations. In its data, classroom constructions did not reach the target since 2018. It included the 192 built classrooms in 2023, which is only 3% of the targeted 6,379 built classrooms under the leadership of Vice President Sara Duterte as DepEd Secretary. In DepEd's defense, they have worked with the Department of Public Works and Highways for classroom constructions, to which the said agency has recently focused its attention to the flood control projects. ACT Teachers Party List Representative Antonio Tino took this as a huge misfavor for the education sector.
Mabigat na statement yan coming from no less than the Secretary of the Department of Education. Pinaprioritize nga ba itong mga corruption-prone flood control projects over classroom construction? Siyempre, napakabigat ng impact yan.
Gabriela Women's Party Representative Sara Ilago also urged the lower chamber to immediately act upon the issue, saying that classroom backlogs have severely affected the learning conditions of students in the country.
Paano ba natin mapapabilis itong pagtugon sa napakatindi natin na backlog pagdating sa classroom sa bansa na nagre-resulta din sa mga gross oversized na mga classes na ang dulo-dulo ay nakaka-apekto sa pag-aaral ng mga kabataan.
As of date, the sector still has over 140,000 classroom construction backlogs. The House of Representatives also approved an additional 35 billion pesos for basic education facilities in the national budget for 2026. Kapatid Amy Achanza, we are One News.
Concerning numbers dyan, 11 classrooms ng isang taon. I think that was 2018, 2019.
Yes.
Tapos
Ngayon,
2022 ba? Zero.
Zero. Ngayon, 2025, the target was supposedly, according to DPWH, 1,770. But dun sa mga lumabas na report natin, mga 22-25 lang yung nagawa daw nilang classroom. So, syempre, ang tinatanong dito also yung aside dun sa mga proseso nila, ano din yung was it a prioritization process? Kasama din ba yun? Kasi pagdating sa budget, meron naman. 'Di ba? Tapos nagkakaroon pa ng mga conflicting statements, numbers no na ini-issue ang DPWH versus sa DepEd. Sinasabi ng DPWH, ito na yung mga nagawa naming classroom. Pero if you will ask DepEd naman, sasabihin nila, no, ganito yung numbers. So maganda dyan, yung COA, i-check nila. 'Di ba? Para walang conflict.
That's why they're trying to pass a bill that will decentralize yung paggawa ng proyekto.
Yeah,
I-separate ang lahat ng, for example, schools will fall under DepEd's guidance to be done per LGU area.
Yes.
Kasi LGU ang nakakaalam. Tapos magkakaroon ng bidding or for the contractors per LGU area na masasakop sa school. Hindi na lahat ng project or infrastructure under DPWH unless it is a national project, a national road, a national bridge. Ayun. Pero yung mga projects na nasasakupan within yung jurisdictional issues ng, let's say, Quezon City, Manila, iaatas sa district office ng area na yun.
Totoo yun. Kasi yan din yung pinupush nila, Congressman Roman Romulo, nila DepEd Secretary Sonny Angara, na yun nga, gawin muna under DepEd, tapos LGU makikipagtulungan pagdating sa classroom construction.
Kasi laging nagtuturuan yung dalawang ahensya kung sino may kasalanan. Ito, kung ganito ang bill na mangyari, malinaw na kung sino ang responsible.
Tapos parang si Secretary Sonny Angara, he's also looking at the time when Brother Luis Tropa, yung nasa DepEd, Armin Luistro, na ang ginawa, nakipag-partner, yung sa private partnership. Kasi sabi niya, at that time, and if you can remember that also, marami-rami yung mga classroom na na-build when they did that project. Sabi niya, baka pwede natin gayahin din yung time na yon para mas marami tayong mga classrooms na ma-build. Hindi tayo ganito na kukulang-kulang.
Hindi mo makukompleto yan Kahit hahabulin mo yung number na backlog, by the time mahabol mo yung backlog, may dumami na ang number of students year in, year out. So, paakyat ng paakyat. So, I think it's going to be very hard if you're gonna centralize it pa rin sa DPWH. So, I agree na, sige, let's try na baka every city, we can address the backlog little by little. Like Quezon City, bahala siya sa mga classroom shortages niya, di ba?
Plus, kasi they know naman which areas yung kailangan ng mga classrooms, di ba? At saka nangyayari kasi, nagkakaroon ng mga, dahil sa kakulangan ng mga classroom na to, nagkakaroon ng mga shifting schedules, ng mga estudyante. Let's say, for example, sa isang lugar, sa Rizal, di ba, merong mag-3 shiftings dyan. Unang batch ng mga mag-aaral will go to 5 a.m. class, tapos may tanghali, tapos may gabi. So nagsasuffer yung quality of education because of that as well, and among other things. So yan, yung mga titignan natin na mga issue tungkol sa classroom construction. Now in other news, top economic officials from the Philippines and France met for the 11th Joint Economic Committee, focusing on infrastructure, transport, energy, aerospace, and maritime cooperation. Mobile Journal Denise Valdesancho has the details.
The Philippines and France have reaffirmed their strong economic partnership through the 11th Philippines-France Joint Economic Committee meeting, held on November 4 in Pasay City. The meeting gathered government officials and business leaders from both countries, led by DTI Undersecretary Alan Gepti and Head of Bilateral Affairs of the French Treasury Magali Sasana. The discussion centered on strengthening cooperation and tackling key challenges in infrastructure, transport, energy, aerospace, and the maritime sector, areas seen as crucial in boosting bilateral trade and investments.
And that's the value of having this regular Joint Economic Committee meeting, because this JEC serves as a platform by which we can address all these issues and challenges.
France also highlighted the progress of a government-to-government financial framework aimed at speeding up project implementation and reducing processing delays. Its first implementation is the OSEA contract with the Philippine Coast Guard, which includes an investment and a shipyard in the country.
And we can see a lot of good prospects as we move forward in our economic relations with them, especially as we embark on a deeper and permanent trade relations as we forge the free trade agreements with the European Union.
Undersecretary Gepti said the outlook for Philippine-French trade relations remains promising. He also highlighted the importance of strengthening ties with other trading partners to mitigate the effects of U.S. tariff policies.
France is one of the major economies in EU. And also, France is very supportive in our advocacy to push for the PACU-FTA negotiation. So we really have to maintain good relations with them.
The Joint Economic Committee continues to serve as a vital platform for sustained dialogue and cooperation, paving the way for more innovative and long-term partnerships between the Philippines and France. Kapatid Denise Valdesancho, we are One News.
The Independent Commission for Infrastructure has asked the Ombudsman to investigate former Public Works Secretary Manuel Bonoan and several officials over an alleged ghost flood control project in Bulacan. Here is the report.
The Independent Commission for Infrastructure has recommended that the Office of the Ombudsman investigate former Public Works Secretary Manuel Bonoan. This is in connection with the possible violation of the Code of Conduct and Ethical Standards following a 72.3 million peso ghost project in Plaridel, Bulacan. Aside from Bonoan, the ICI is also urging an investigation into former DPWH Undersecretaries Roberto Bernardo and Maria Catalina Cabral.
Their acts and omissions indicate a failure to secure the required diligence and oversight expected of public officers entrusted with administration of public funds, thereby resulting in evident injury to the government.
The ICI also recommended investigating several DPWH district officials, including Henry Alcantara and Bryce Hernandez, as well as contractor Yumir Villanueva of Top Notch Catalyst Construction. They could face charges of graft, malversation, falsification, and violations of the Government Procurement Reform Act. According to the ICI, there was massive collusion behind anomalous flood control projects.
The fact is that congressmen and senators are told by DPWH kung saan distrito sila pwedeng magbaba. There are favorite district offices where they give very high SOPs, no? And maliwanag na yun, no, sa findings ng ICI.
Ombudsman Boying Remulla also described the issue as an act of gross negligence.
You're the leader of one house, and the other house is led by Senator Chis Escudero as Senate President. And they were able to come up with that budget, which included insertions, and which included diversions of money from what was supposed to be to what became. So that is If it's not criminal, then it must be negligence. It must be one of them. It cannot be completely, nobody can be completely blameless for that. Leadership principle yan eh. The buck stops with you.
The Ombudsman is also forming a special task force to investigate the multi-billion peso flood control project linked to the Villar family stretching from Las Piñas to Bacoor, Cavite. More referrals from the ICI are also expected to follow. The Ombudsman is confident that formal charges will be filed by November 11 and that some of those involved may spend Christmas behind bars.
Sabi nga ni former COA Commissioner Heidi Mendoza, sabi niya kapag daw may nakulong na, magpapagupit na siya. Yun ang sanabi niya. But ito regarding dun sa recommendation ng ICI through its chairman, Andres Reyes, sinasabi nga nila specifically dito dun kung saan nila inuugnay itong sila Bryce Hernandez, sila Secretary Bonoan, doon daw sa area ng Plaridel, Bulacan, sa may Purok 4, ay supposedly may in-implement doon na flood control which is ghost din. According dun sa report, nilagay nila that it was relocated, supposedly the project, pero doon daw, base doon sa kanilang document na hindi naman approved yung relocation. And when they visited the relocation, wala din naman. So talagang nakikita mo na may pagpapabaya doon sa that is a single project pa lang We're not talking about yung iba pa. So ito yung mga iba, mga naunang inimbestigahan na ng ICI for recommendation nga sa Ombudsman.
Ghost project.
Oo, ghost. Wala talaga.
Non-existent project ang kalakaran ngayon ng mga... And mga nakikita kasi natin ngayon is all from, madami from Bulacan. We're not even talking about yet yung... If you look at the computation sa Bulacan alone, yung mga ghost projects and substandard, ang laki na. Isang budget na halos yan ng isang taon, almost, sabi nga nila, well, let's take a look at the north, which is the Ilocos going down to the Benguet region. Let's take a look at the southern areas. You're talking about the Mindanao, you're talking about the Visayas. Magkano kaya kung tinotal mo Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao? Budget for ilang taon yan. Kaya nga, di ba, yung mga foreign investors that did research in the Philippines, we have so much natural resources in this country.
So much money.
At daming pera daw ng Philippines due to the population na nagbabayad ng tax. And yet, we don't see the money trickle down to the people. Oo, GDP-wise, mataas. But we all know naman, GBT is hooked on spending, government spending. So, the more you spend, tataas GDP mo, but it's not really organic. Hindi tumatama sa tao. Dahil dumidiretso sa bulsa.
Yun eh. Pero di ba sinasabi nga, ano ba yung iba pang mga areas, di ba? Ano ba yung sinusundan ng ICI doon sa areas when it comes to their investigation, kung saan yung uunahin, sino yung uunahin. I think they're basing it din doon sa sa initial report ni PBBM. Yes. Di ba doon sa I think 3,000 to 6,000 flood control projects under 15 contractors, which is kasama nga doon yung sila Diskaya and others pa.
Sunwest, Legacy.
Yeah, yun pa.
St. Timothy. All right, don't go away because we're not done yet. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching News and Views here on One News.
The government's relief operations are underway following the onslaught of Typhoon Tino. Let's get the latest from DSWD Assistant Secretary or ASEC Irene Dumlao. ASEC, magandang umaga po sa inyo. Thanks for joining us again.
Hi, Angela and Diego. Good morning.
Well, I hope we're talking nga po na different circumstances pero wala po tayong magawa ngayon. Ano po ba yung mga lugar na po ang naabutan po ng tulong ng DSWD?
Well, as of this morning, ang DSWD ay nakapagpaabot na po ng mahigit 123,000 na mga family food packs sa iba't ibang lugar sa ating bansa, particularly in Region 6, in Region 7, gayon din po sa Region 8, in particular Southern Leyte, gayon din po sa Region Caraga na una nga po na naapektuhan nitong si Bagyong Tino. Other parts of the country were also assisted. Like dito po sa Palawan na kaninang umaga lamang po ay tinamaan nito nga po si Bagyong Tino. And as we speak ay nag-distribute pa rin po ang aming mga field offices ng mga family food packs dun sa mga naapektuhan ng bagyo. Apart from the family food packs and ready-to-eat food boxes that we have distributed, non-food items such as sleeping kits and hygiene kits were also distributed to those inside evacuation centers. And gayon din po sa mga locally stranded individuals, particularly sa mga ports in Matnog, Sorsogon, and dyan din po sa Bicol, nakapag-provide din po tayo ng hot meals through our mobile kitchen.
Okay, bukod po dito sa mga nabanggit nyo, meron po bang pwedeng ma-avail yung mga typhoon victims like yung mga calamity financial assistance from DSWD or other agencies?
Yes, for those na mga naapektuhan at may mga nasugatan po na family members o meron pong mga namatay because nakita naman po natin yung casualties.
That's true.
Pwede pong mag-provide din ng assistance ang DSWD through medical and burial assistance under the assistance to individuals in crisis situation. At kanina umaga nakita rin po natin na nag-declare na po ang probinsya ng Cebu ng state of calamity. So this trigger mechanism would actually activate the emergency cash transfer of the DSWD. Of course, kinakailangan lang na makita natin doon sa situation report kung magiging open na yung local market. And it should also be reflected in the post-disaster report of the local government unit that additional intervention is necessary, so we could proceed in the implementation of the emergency cash transfer. But this financial assistance actually aims to help those who have been affected by the typhoon, especially yung mga nasira yung kanilang mga tahanan, nasira yung kanilang pong mga livelihood. So this intervention is one of those being implemented to support the early recovery ng mga kababayan po.
Yes, may dagdag ko lang kasi kung paano nila, Arsec, paano po natin maibababa yung impormasyon na ito na nabanggit nyo sa amin, dun mismo po sa mga typhoon victims.
Yes, actually yung ating pong mga field offices, particularly yung aming pong mga regional directors, they're working closely with the local government units at nakikipag-coordinate po sila so that una, alam po natin kung sino-sino yung mabibigyan natin ng mga food and non-food items, especially that we're still in the response phase. At gayon din po, ipinapaalam natin kung ano pa yung ibang tulong na maaari nga pong maibigay ng DSWD because Secretary Rex Gatchalian wants us to reach out to our local partners and assure them that DSWD is here not only for the response phase but up to the early recovery phase. So dyan pa lang po na pag-uusapan na ano yung mga tulong na po pwede pa natin ipaabot doon sa mga nasasakupan po nila.
Asek, given that we're still in response and recovery stage, and malawak tong tinamaan ng Typhoon Tino, ang daming areas making landfall 8 times, are we ready in case Monday po, sabi ng Pag-asa, high probability of Typhoon 1 making landfall that definitely will hit daw Northern Luzon, Central Luzon. Does DSWD have enough supplies and manpower to deal with both these calamities?
Yes, Diego, that's correct. As we're working on our disaster response efforts for those who have been affected by Tino, we're now preparing for the typhoon that's about to enter the country and might affect nga po the northern part of the Philippines based on the early forecast. Now, ang DSWD po, meron tayong mga nakapreposition pa po na mga mahigit 2 million family food packs. And while we have stockpiles, we continue to produce family food packs doon po sa aming mga major production hubs. So we're able to produce around 18 to 20,000 food packs daily. So we're able to prepare for the possible effect of the incoming typhoon.
Okay.
Well, Asek, how are we working with the LGU po ng itong mga areas na affected po ng Typhoon Tino dahil marami pa rin po daw ng mga barangay doon nang hindi kumbaga makontak, yung iba stranded, yung iba hindi makontak dahil walang signal, walang kuryente para po mapaabot ng DSWD yung inyo pong tulong.
Actually po, doon po sa Southern Leyte, ang ginawa po ng ating field office, dineploy po namin yung ating mobile command center. Yung mobile command center po kasi natin, that's equipped with generator. Meron din po yung Starlink, so we're able to generate and submit reports on time para po ma-inform agad kami dito sa regional office at sa central office at makapag-action po kami batay doon sa assessment na na-submit from the ground. Gayon din po doon sa mga kababayan nga natin na maaari gusto po nilang maki-charge. Pwede rin po magamit actually yung mobile command center. They could also connect to our Wi-Fi so they could also communicate with their family members who are outside their respective areas or their provinces. So nakakatulong po ito sa komunikasyon and yan po isa sa mga strategies na ginawa natin. Ginawa din po natin yan dito sa Region 7 so that we could really have real-time reports. Now, ang kagandahan po ng buong bansa handa program ng DSWD, nakapag-preposition po tayo up to the last mile. So once the reports reach our office, pwede na po nating ma-dispatch yung po mga naka-preposition na goods. And actually, even before that, tayo na po yung nag-reach out doon sa LGU to assure them that we could help them again as part of our mandate to augment the resources of our partners.
Yun kasi yung challenge doon, ang hirap yung pag hindi mo makontak, tsaka alam mo hindi mo madaanan dahil doon sa mga roads are impassable talaga. Diego.
Alright, thank you for that, DSWD Assistant Secretary Irene Dumlao, for joining us on our program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diego and Angela, for the opportunity. Magandang umaga po sa inyo.
Thank you.
Right, Think Muna Pilipinas, in partnership with UNESCO, recently held MILCon 2025 to promote media and information literacy and empower Filipinos to discern truth from misinformation in the digital age. Mobile journalist Francis Rivera has the report.
Think Muna conducts its Philippine Media Information Literacy Conference, or MILCON 2025, with the theme of Truth Under Fire, Empowering Critical Thinking in the Age of AI.
SMX Aura was filled with discussions from the panelists of Think Muna Pilipinas in collaboration with UNESCO at MILCON 2025 last Tuesday, November 4. MediaQuest and Signal President and CEO Jane Jimenez Basas delivered her opening remarks for MILCON. In her speech, she urged different sectors to unite in combating disinformation and misinformation. She hoped that dialogues like this would help address illiteracy among Filipino students.
I'm hoping that this really jumpstarts the conversation as we gathered from today's event, the solution to solving the illiteracy issues in the Philippines, particularly among grade school students. It's not an easy thing to solve. It goes beyond just one sector. But our role in the media sector is to ensure that the information is given out there and that the conversation continues to happen across all sectors and across the entire Philippines.
UNESCO Director to Jakarta Maki Katsuno Hayashikawa also took part in the event, where she presented UNESCO's wide-ranging view on media and information literacy. The Senate Committee Chairman for Basic Education, Science and Technology, Senator Bam Aquino, was one of the key speakers at the event. In his speech, he pointed out that Filipino youth are vocal about not normalizing corruption in the country.
Marami po sa mga kabataan natin, sa kanila nanggagaling yung galit. Sila po yung nagsabi na hindi dapat i-normalize ang korupsyon. Sila po yung nagsabi na hindi tayo papayag na ganito na lang ang bansa natin. It means that we deserve and we require to be able to move forward as a country. And we deserve, because all of us here are taxpayers. Lahat tayo dito nagbabayad ng buwis, and we deserve these services in our country.
In an interview, Senator Bam Aquino said that being media literate serves as a defense for youth against fake news and expressed his support for the advocacy of Think Muna Pilipinas.
Napakahalaga po ng media literacy sa panahon ngayon na maraming fake news, misinformation, disinformation. Yung pagkakaroon po ng media literacy sa ating mga eskwelahan, yan po yung defense ng ating mga kabataan pagdating po sa maling impormasyon. So mahalaga po na maipatupad ito at suportado po natin ang advokasya at ang batas na ito.
In the opening segment of the panel discussion, the primary focus centered on the complex issues in education and the importance of integrating MIL into the curriculum, with Mon Isiberto, Head of Corporate Communications at MediaQuest, serving as the moderator. The first panel featured Saijan Norminen, Ambassador of the Finland to the Philippines, Gerson Abisamis, Director of the Bureau of Learning Delivery at DepEd, Ramon Tuazon, Secretary General of the Asian Media Information and Communication Center, and Carlo Concepcion, President of the Philippine Association for Media and Information Literacy. The second part of the discussion focused on the role of media in combating fake news and upholding the truth. The media panel featured a diverse mix of traditional and social media personalities, including Philstar Media Group Executive Lucien C.D. Tioco, Malaysian Kini Media Head Tam Sin Hao, content creator Mona Magnovelos, also known as Mighty Magulang, and News 5 and Storycon anchor Ed Lingao. The session was moderated by One News anchor Regina Hing. The final part of the discussion mainly focused on technology, specifically on building an AI-literate digital citizenry. The segment explored various tools and methods to use AI responsibly and enhance media literacy to avoid falling victim to fake news. The panel featured Toph Rada, Head of Corporate Affairs at Maya, Attorney Yves Gonzalez, Public Policy Head for the Philippines at TikTok, Adeline Hulin, Head of the Media and Information Literacy Unit at UNESCO Headquarters, and Lisa Garcia from the Foundation for Media Alternatives. The session was moderated by Ana Lomdadsi of UNESCO Jakarta. Mayors Jenny Sandoval of Malabon City and Joy Belmonte of Quezon City were also among the speakers. Mayor Joy Belmonte encouraged the young journalists to remain committed to the truth.
Stay committed to what is right, to what is true, spread only the truth, and share the capacity to discern what is true with others, other young people.
MediaQuest Chairman Manny V. Pangilinan highlighted in his closing remarks that even amid false information, people continue to pursue and value the truth.
Maraming bumabaltos sa katotohanan, pero mas madami tayo mas gusto ang katotohanan. Let us not grow weary of the work of discernment. Let us invite more Filipinos into this alliance of truth seekers.
He added that the main advocacy of the Milcon is for the truth, especially in an age where information comes mainly from social media.
It's really an advocacy for the truth, no? The truth in media generally. So both the legacy media that we are familiar with, the newspapers, free-to-air television, and even pay TV, and of course now the internet, which is now dominating the media space.
MediaQuest Corporate Communications Head Mon Isiberto reminded us that the use of AI can be a very helpful tool as long as users are responsible in using it.
Well, the way I think to look at AI from the point of view of a journalist is that it's yet another powerful tool. So the key here is to learn how to use that tool. And AI is certainly one of those tools that's going to be very helpful for you as long as you use it ethically, and responsibly.
So before you post or share information online, mga kapatid, mobile journalist Francis Rivera, we are One News.
And that wraps up today's episode of News and Views.
Join us again tomorrow. I'm Angela Lagunsad Castro.
And I'm Angelo Castro, the third kapatid. We are One News.
All sides, all the time.